Got a Briggs and Stratton 1022 ER we're looking at this morning. The 950 208cc Briggs and Stratton engine on it. Customer says that it won't start and it was leaking gas. So when it starts, they said it'd bog real bad. As soon as you took the choke off, it'd die. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but the first thing you always want to do before you start anything is you want to check your oil. Make sure that there's no gas or anything mixed in with it, especially since in this case they're telling me that there was oil mixed in with it. So check that. Make sure that when you're looking at it, you don't see, on some of these they're hard to see, but if you see above that line, if it's shiny all the way up above where your oil level is, that means that you've got some gas sitting on top of the oil. So this one's not like that, but a lot of times they will be, and it's kind of hard to see on the dipstick because it gets real thin sitting on top of the oil. The oil will sit under the gas will just sit there on top. So doesn't look like it's doing that. Doesn't really look like there was much fuel in it when I looked down in there. So I think maybe it's all leaked out or something. I put just a tiny splash in there to see what happens if we try to start it up. So we're gonna go ahead and give it a whirl. Well, I've got electric start on this thing, and it doesn't look like it is plugged in. All right, there we go. So this thing doesn't look like it's doing anything whatsoever. There is enough gas in it where it should be getting something. But with them saying it was leaking gas, it could just be flooded out. Okay, so I'm not getting anything whatsoever at this point. That's a good time to go ahead and check the spark. If your unit isn't starting when you're trying to give it some fuel and stuff, you can take the spark plug out, or you can use an inline tester or a clip-on like what I have here, just to show you what's going on. So we're getting good spark from the unit, our oil level's good. There's no real good way just to add a quick splash of starting fluid or anything to it. So we're going to take this first off as a carburetor issue. 9 times out of 10, that's what it is. So we're going to go ahead and get down to the carburetor and figure out what's going on, especially since they said it was leaking gas. Gas leaking out of the carburetor is a very common issue, and it's one of those things that happen after the carburetor gets gummed up over time. So we'll figure out exactly what's going on. We'll get this thing fixed. So you won't need much to get this going. All you really need is you're going to need a pair of needle nose pliers or some sort of pliers to take the fuel line clamp and take the fuel line off. You'll need just a regular screwdriver for the main jet and to pry out the top pilot jet. I like to use a lot of times just a regular wire brush, and I'll just pull some of the looms out. So I'll just take it and I'll grab it with a pair of needle nose and just pull one of these looms of these brass pieces out and use those to clean everything. That's what I prefer even to this day. I use that just consistently. A lot of times I'll just pull those out and they clean really well. The brass ones do for sure. Some people like these. They make it kind of easy sometimes. But that's just to clean all your small passages. You'll definitely need something small like a single piece or strand of this to get in that top jet, which I'll show you. But we'll take this thing apart quickly here. So it looks like in order to get the carburetor off, you just really need a 10mm deep well. And you're going to need that you're going to need that, or you can use a 10mm wrench to get to the back side. So your 10mm, the deep well is the easiest thing because you can use that for all of it, and it just goes right on. I can also take off the top with it. So top two screws just come out. Notice those do have kind of a flange to them, so you want to pay attention to where those go back to. I don't think there's any others here, but you can use either a screwdriver or a pair of pliers to pry up on your choke rod there. Normally, just pries straight up and off. Just snaps off of there. And then the whole assembly comes off. So it just pulls up and off to the side. So it's out of the way. And then you can get your, there's a 5/16 bolt that goes right there into the plastic. I like to use a right angle, but so basically a 5/16, a 10mm, and then the tools you just saw. That's really all we need. So 10mm here on the front again, and it will have to be some sort of socket. You can't get a wrench in there. So it's right down at the front. Get a little bit better angle on this. Not quite down low enough to see taking this carburetor off. Okay. So right there, I just took the one nut off this side. I'm taking this one off now. Oop, thought I was until I grabbed the wrong impact with a 5/16. So that's just your two nuts that come off the front. And then from there you can just take and pull the whole plastic assembly out. So it comes out and away, and that just comes off. So when we put that back on there, we'll just make sure that this is locked back up underneath the front. No big deal. And then this is where the 10mm deep well comes in handy at. So as I said, you don't have to have a deep well here. You can use a wrench there, but for the other part to get in that plastic, you're gonna have to have a 10mm socket of some sort. That'll be real good with a wrench. You can take these off. Front assembly comes directly off this screen here. They put these on a lot of them, and they love to put a gasket on the back of something that just vents back to atmosphere, pulls straight from the air. But anyway, carburetor, straight down through. We're just gonna take the fuel line, pull it up, and then on the fuel line, I like to grab from the bottom here and twist it. Make sure it moves back and forth quite a ways before you try to take it up. And that's just so it kind of breaks free from that metal, so you don't rip or tear it when you're trying to pry it upwards to get that off of there. So I think I did tear it just a tiny bit. We like to just drain it into a bucket. I've got a bucket down under here. Oh, and it does have a little bit of fuel still in it, so I'm not sure what's going on there. I just put that in it. I didn't put much. I didn't think I did. I thought it was completely empty before I did, though. So we'll take our primer up off, and that's your carburetor completely off of there at that point. So it's completely off. I like to take the intake gasket off at the same time. This one's pretty thin. We're going to replace that before we put everything back together. Okay, so let's get down to our carburetor. We'll go ahead and pull this thing apart and see exactly what the inside looks like. So it doesn't look like there's any water or anything like that down in there. No water. The fuel looks fine. I think it was probably pretty well empty before we got into it. So we've got your... Oh yeah, if you look there, the needle on this side, which is right there, this metal piece, it's not actually moving as we're going up and down. So as we're pushing it up, there's a spring that actuates it straight through there. There's a spring that actuates it and pushes that needle up to hold it closed, and it's not actually moving. It's staying exactly stationary and not moving whatsoever. So that's probably why we're getting leaking gas. Now when we go to take this out of here, when something like this happens, your float doesn't want to come out. It's being held in by that needle. So it's that needle shoved in there. You want to take the needle and grab it with a pair of needle nose, and you want to turn it from side to side. So that's going to keep you from ruining your float as you're taking that out of there. Other times people break off their float pretty easily. So just take and work that back and forth, and once you work it back and forth, it'll come right out. So if you look, you can see all that gunk just all over it there. Just green gunk everywhere. So not what you want. That's just from ethanol buildup. So you can either take everything apart all at once or take it apart piece by piece and work section by section. So we've got the float bowl and everything off. Got the stuck needle out of there. We haven't cleaned up the seat or anything like that yet. But we're going to go ahead and take the main jet out down through there. That's what supplies your whole engine with fuel, is this here. And this is where it comes into the unit after it comes through the nipple. So it drains down through and comes through here, and that's where that needle was stuck in the open position. So that's why the fuel continued to flood past. On this one, it actually should overfill through here and leak out down on the outside of the carburetor as opposed to flooding the crankcase. So just kind of a safety feature they have in there. If they leak, that way the crankcase doesn't get flooded. Sometimes it seems not to work very well, but anyway, your screwdriver that goes down in there, you don't want it to be too wide. It's got to fit down in there, and you don't want it to be too skinny either, because then you'll mess up that brass down in there. So you want something that's a good width and really something that's solid all the way across. This one's kind of got that diamond shape to it, and that's not really ideal. But it's about the right size. So a lot of times the units that, so it looked like it tried to spin a little bit as I was turning it. A lot of times the utility screwdrivers that have like a Phillips and a straight at one edge, and a Phillips and straight at the other edge, those are some of the best things to use. Look at all that green just ethanol gunk coming out of there. So what you want to do, we throw these in the ultrasonic cleaner normally, especially when they're this dirty. That's what we're going to do, and we're going to let it go ahead and run in there for probably about 10 minutes or so, just to get all the gunk out of here. So we took this. This screw actually controls, contrary to popular belief, it does do something. It keeps your governor from coming back only so far. So it keeps it from going too low. When you put it back in, you want about 1/4 inch from here to the other side is normally where these run. We'll take this top pilot jet out. Now on these, there is a jet that goes straight down through. So you'll want to make sure that's clear when we're getting everything cleared out there. But you can go ahead and take the gasket off there for the bowl, just to make sure it doesn't get all stretched out and stuff when you put it in the cleaner. So obviously if you don't have an ultrasonic cleaner, you can use just gum out or something like that, like we do once we get it cleaned. So everything will go down in the cleaner bowl, and you can leave out, I like to leave out the bottom gasket a lot of times. This one's actually metal anyway, so it doesn't matter. But if it's a paper gasket, some of them have paper gaskets, I like to leave those out just so they don't get ruined in the wash. Come over and get this all put in there. The ultrasonic cleaner we run, it works pretty well. Does a really good job in just a very short period of time. We leave it on, and it's definitely hot today. Usually doesn't take too long to get that way. Okay, so we'll go ahead and hit this and go ahead and set it for 10 minutes. Leave it here to cook. see it flowing up off of there. So we've got it out of the cleaner. Spent that about 10 minutes in there. From here, if you don't have an ultrasonic cleaner, you can just clean it with the gum out like we're going to. So we're just going to make sure everything's cleaned off all over the outside. A lot of times they have a lot more gunk than this all over the outside. We'll also want to go down through. And you want to pay special attention to your inlet. Pressurize it real good. We always like to blow compressed air back through it. Get anything that's stuck up in there back through. So it will blow anything that's stuck in there. Some of them have a screen down in there. This will clean all that out without having to take any of that apart. Just going down through and then blowing back with compressed air if you've got it. I've seen people use, you know, things like duster and things like that to blow them out. Just something to get it all clean. So go back both ways, back down and through. And you can do that a couple times just to ensure there's nothing left in there. You want to make sure that that's not blocked, otherwise eventually it'll die of starvation if there's an obstruction. So blow down all through these passages. Get everything down dry now. So you kind of do the same thing with everything else. You want to make sure there's no varnish or anything on your float. It's looking pretty good. And then on your jets. So with your main jet, you can use something simple, again, as simple as a wire brush to clean down through these. And that's what I like. But the loom, just take it out. And it makes it super simple just to clean down through there. So, other people also like torch tip cleaners and things like that. We use those. That works great for going up through the main jet here, making sure it is 100% clear, which it seems to be. You want to get any of that ethanol gunk all across there off. If there's any green to it, it's not supposed to be there. And you don't want to use anything other than brass at this point, because you don't want that brass to be all jacked up. Brass normally won't scratch brass real bad. They're both soft, obviously. So make sure that there's no spots down in the middle here that's going to be different, where you're going to get an issue where a piece of something comes back off. So make sure this hole, there's no green down in there also. Clean down through it. You want that 100% clear, and then you should be able to see light on the back side if you're looking through. It should be a perfect circle down through there. If you don't see that, you've still got an obstruction. So either way you go, you should see a perfect circle down through there. So next we'll go to the emulsion tube. And when you're spraying this, you should see an even spray come out of there everywhere. It's the only way to know if it's completely actually cleared or not. And it looked pretty good coming up out, but you can also check again by making sure you're seeing perfect circles coming through your holes. That's going to tell you that they're all the way clear. Make sure there's no green gum around any of this. Anything here, clean it all off. One of the most important areas is this and then that main jet down there at the bottom. So clean that off very well. Make sure it's nice and dry, everything's off of it. Then your pilot jet up top here. We're going to make sure with one of these small pieces that this jet is open. If that jet is not open, you'll get surging from the unit. So you should be able to see it down through the hole there. So yeah, if that's not clear, you'll get surging real bad. So again, blow that off. You want to make sure those O-rings are intact. There's one at the spot, both there and there. So if those aren't intact, you want to replace this piece. Otherwise you'll get leaking from there and it won't run right also. You can go ahead and reinsert. If it's hard to get down, get that down, all you want to do, you can hit it with either the butt of a screwdriver or anything kind of hard and kind of just tap it on down in there. Again, put this back in and you want it to be about 1/4 of an inch passed through to the other side, just to keep to keep that throttle plate at least that far open all the time. It won't let it go past that point. Next, the most important part. Right down in, you can see a bunch of green at this inlet still. So we need to work on that. I'm going to take just another wire loom from this, all of those, and I'm going to go ahead and clean that out real well. So and these aren't quite as good as the other ones were. But all I'm doing is using that to kind of take all that, and it's brass on brass again, so it's not scratching it or anything, but to take all that out of there. I'm going to use some carb cleaner also. That's fine. Some people like to use something like this for this, which is also good. You can work it around the outside edge. You can also just use the biggest size of the torch tip cleaner. That works well also. You just kind of go up and down all the way around the edge. You just want the outside edge of that brass not to hang up your seat as it's going up through there. So you can kind of see just all the stuff it's taken off at this point. Again, just kind of up and down. Pull that out again. All right, so instead of seeing green down through there, see just a tiny bit of the remnants of it. Just a tiny bit of the remnants. So we're going to keep cleaning that just a little bit more. Oop. Yeah, you want that all the way clean, because if not, you'll be right back in the same boat. So both here with the needle in the seat and then with the main jet. Again, those are your two most important parts. As long as those are clear, it's going to run. That top pilot jet, that'll start it surging if it's not clear. But the rest is pretty simple. So I'll clear these back off again. And I went ahead and grabbed a different needle here. That other one I bent just slightly, taking it out. So just grabbed one I had sitting to the side. You want to make sure each of these four corners are really well cleaned off. Those four corners of that needle, if they're not cleaned off, that's where it's going to stick against the side of the walls. So to load this, you just preload the spring, and then you bring it up and over on. So as long as you're holding that spring, it's easy to get up and off and easy to get back on. And that's just holding that spring up there. For when the float goes up, that spring is what actually actuates your needle under spring tension to hold it against the brass to seal it. So we got it nice and clean down in there now. So we're going to go ahead and put and it should move in and out just easy as can be. So you can test it by either suction with a vacuum, or you can do it by mouth and just make sure when it's upside down that it suctions to your tongue or your lip or something like that. And then when it comes up, that you can actually blow through it. Either way you want to do it if you want to test it. We're going to go ahead and put the bowl gasket back on. Oops. Now it did swell a little bit on us. If it swells too big, it's kind of hard to get back on there. But usually with this lip, as long as you can get it in there, what you can do is you can, as you're putting the bowl on, kind of work it down through. So go ahead and put now the larger part goes down if the carburetor is upside down. So if it's upside down, your longer part's going to go down through that way. If it's right side up, obviously it's opposite of that. But then we got your main jet. It's going to go back down in there. And just go ahead and screw it back down in. You want to be sure at this point you don't get anything picked up with the needle or the seat or the float or anything. No kind of black specks. A lot of times I like to blow it back off before I put that bowl gasket back on, just to make sure it doesn't swell. So Let me see. So as I do this, I'm just going to kind of work that back over. Yeah, see it kind of pop back down. It's kind of pop back down in there. So now that the gasket's in the right spot, I can go ahead and put my bottom bolt back in. Okay, so that's the carburetor reassembly after we got it cleaned, after it was all gummed up from some ethanol issues, as you could see. We're going to put it back on and see how this thing runs. As I said, the intake gasket needs replaced. We usually use the Honda intake gaskets. They're the same, a little bit better quality, and they're not as expensive. So go ahead and throw that up top, and we'll get moved up top so we can finish up. Go. Okay, I think we're in a good spot now. Alright, so the carburetor goes straight back on like so. You want to get that spring on up top, on the back here. You want to hook that into your small hole here first. And then as you pull the governor rod towards you and the carburetor kind of out, you'll push it just down and in. So let me get a little better shot of that up front here real quick. Up top. So you want your carb still out, and you're going to want to pull it kind of outwards, and you'll push it down and in. So your carb needs to be a little way away from the intake at this point to make it easiest. Otherwise, if you have any difficulties, you can also unscrew that screw that we screwed in a little bit, and that makes it easier so it goes back further for you to get that piece in, and then you can get it after that. So at this point, once everything's up on there, you want to go ahead and move your throttle rod and make sure that it springs back like it should. Make sure everything's working. Make sure it's all free and clear like it should be. So it looks like it is. On this, you want to blow out the gas tank of anything that's in it. So a lot of times what you can do, a lot of times what people will do is they'll go ahead and get just a clean rag and throw it down in there and pressurize the tank. So you see here, there's really nothing coming out of the fuel line, but it's definitely not empty. So go ahead and tip it back. You see there's still a bunch coming out of it. You just want to make sure all that fuel's out of there just in case you have some bad fuel. You never know what's in it. You always like to start fresh if you got a carb cleaning going. So we're going to blow through the top again. And all that rag's doing is kind of keeping the fuel from coming up out of there, and then it's absorbing any of the fuel that's bouncing up onto it. So otherwise, if you blow down in, it'll just come up, you know, back and almost hit you in the face a lot of times. But we like to make sure it's all the way dry. You can also, after you think it's all the way dry, you can also go ahead and flush it out with some good fuel. That helps a lot, just to draw any of the moisture to it, and then you can take it off the bottom. So we've got it pretty well dried out at this point. You can go also back up through. So it's dry at this point. Let's throw just a little bit of fuel in it. And that's just to kind of grab anything bad that's left in there that we missed and pull it out. And then now that we're going to be nice and flushed, that tank's all good, right at the end of this, as soon as we're done, put that on there. Oop, looks like I got some pieces of my wire brush there. Alright, we're gonna finish filling it up. It's nice also if you fill it up before you finish putting everything back together. you'd know at this point if anything goes wrong. So if you put it back together and you see some leaking starting, you know you obviously shouldn't go any further. You might as well just stop at that point, go ahead and replace the carb or something like that instead of doing anything else. So all right. Now, almost looks like this is leaking. Let's see. I don't know if I just spilled some on it or if it's leaking. Doesn't seem like it's leaking now, so we'll go ahead and reassemble everything. And again, your screen goes right back on there. Make sure the gasket's on the back there if you want it. Just got your couple 10mm screws. If you use your deep well, again, nice and easy. Okay, and then from there, you can go ahead and, I think I want to put that primer line back on there before we try. So let's throw this primer line on. If the end is cracked or anything like that, you're going to want to just snip it back just a hair, but this one's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. So as this goes on, it just comes up and slips straight in. And then from the top, so it slips straight in there, and then the other piece slips straight in on that side. So the top piece has to be slid in at the same time as you're sliding this in, so it all kind of comes off and goes together at once, like such. Then your top piece comes up and around. Make sure not to jumble up any of the wires or anything like that are coming up. That also, along with the primer line, you want those kind of in the right spot. And then up top, we'll line up the two up there. So two 10mm for the intake studs, just one on each side. Okay, look up top. So, and these do have the little flanges in them, or the little bushings on the end of them, so you want to make sure they're centered as they're going down, otherwise you'll smash that plastic wrong. Make sure that the hookup is on the back of your switch there also. Tighten them down. Go ahead and put this choke back on. It just pushes back down on there. And now we're going to hook it up and see if we can't get it to start right up for us. So again, we already put fuel in it. Got plenty of fuel in it. It's new fuel. I did forget the 5/16. It screws into the plastic. On the downside, I'm going to go ahead and throw it back in real quick. And we will fire this thing up. I'm not going to prime it or anything. Usually when they're usually when it's not super cold out, they don't even need any of that. So we're just going to hit the button and see what happens. So there it is. If it's not starting, if it's starting but running rough, or if you're leaking fuel from the carburetor, whichever way it happens, that should fix it for you. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.